Well, hello, New Life City Church. Welcome. It's great to have you guys tuning in. We want to continue to have conversations that will encourage the body of New Life and will encourage other people in who we are. And so one of the things we thought we might talk about today is some of the key things that make the decisions around New Life. So if you ever are around us very much, you'll hear some of our main things like worship, community, mission, and generosity. There's also some key values that are behind those. And so we thought we'd dig into some of those just, again, so you can get to know who we are a little better and we can all grow in that. And so today we're going to talk about authenticity and grace. And so the value behind that says this: we strive to live our lives with humility, honesty, integrity, and truth, both publicly and privately, accept God's undeserved favor, and extend undeserved favor to others. We're also trusting in His enabling power, the other side of grace, to live a life pleasing to Him. So that's the values of authenticity and grace, and we as we live that out here at New Life, we live it out in some very practical ways, and I think we're going to talk about some of those. But as always, we start with the Bible as our compass. And so, what do you guys think the Bible Scripture has to say about authenticity and grace?
A lot.
Excellent.
I mean, I think this is probably one of my favorite core values that we have. Just growing up in the church, and Don, you grew up in the church. You guys, I think we've all grown up in the church, and so we've been around it a long time. And there's this little aura of the church that's like they're fake, you know. Mm-hmm. They're just, you know, trying to be holier than thou. Yeah. And it's like, actually, some churches I've been to are pretty annoying to me too. And church people, I mean, yeah. That's it. It's annoying, right? It's like trying to be somebody we're not. So I think it's super important for us to be able to be in our own skin, be authentic, accept grace and show grace. You know, not in a whimsical, you know, just let everything go type way. But I like that, and I think it's significant for our church to make that a core value.
You remind me of a passage of Scripture I hadn't thought about till you were talking. Jesus gives us instructions on what to do when someone offends us, and in particular, he says when your brother offends you or your brother sins against you. You know, we're talking about being authentic and showing grace. He says, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. He doesn't say go and minimize it. He doesn't say go and trivialize it. He doesn't say go and, it really was no big deal. He doesn't even say go and just shove it, you know, be a man of God and just shove it down and grow up and walk away. No, he says you go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. And he says if he hears you, you will have gained your brother back. Mm-hmm. That's authentic. That's genuine. That's real. Meaning that if Matt offends me, that I have a responsibility as the innocent party to go to the guilty party and talk to him about the offense. And I'm not to go and say, well, it really was no big deal, Matt. I don't know why I'm even talking to you about it. No, he says go and tell Matt. Now, what's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is that Matt may be totally ignorant of what he has done, how he offended me. So by me talking about it, he's instructed, okay, I don't need to talk about Don's grandmother anymore and crack jokes about her. That's offensive. And so he doesn't do that again.
Yeah.
I think that's true authentic Christianity in that sense, in that we're being reconciled, Matt and I. Mm-hmm. He says, if he hears me, I will have gained my brother. When did I lose my brother? At the offense. So I'm going to gain him as I approach him, take the initiative, and we talk about the problem.
If we take that trail,
yeah,
I have been down that trail, and it doesn't always turn out so rosy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, I mean, have you guys ever had a conversation with somebody like, "Hey, Jeff, hope you're doing okay. I like that shirt. I got to talk to you about something here real quick, okay? You really bothered me earlier." I mean, I have had this conversation and it tanks, right? I mean, I'm just trying to be authentic here, okay? So let's talk about this because it's a real thing. It is. I read the Bible.
Yeah.
I believe you, Don. I'm
well, you
playing
believe
a
the
little
Bible.
devil's advocate here, but I'm just like, can we be a little honest here with everybody and say that it sounds good in Matthew, but when Troy says it, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Or I've had people come to me and I'm like, truthfully, I'm like, oh yeah, it's no problem. I get done and I'm like, are you joking? Like, why? Why would you bring that up to me? All right, that's enough authenticity. You're kicked out. What are your thoughts? I mean, I'm just trying to dig in on it.
So, question for you guys. So, I'm a little bit younger, right? So, I'm wisdom here in the room. So, say
it's on this end. This end. Okay,
let's say
I've already blown this whole thing.
Let's say I want to be authentic and have that conversation, but I don't know how. Like, what would you guys suggest as like someone that wants to do that or be authentic? Like, how would you guys say, even maybe a biblical story to tell about it, or a story you have of just how you would go about being that authentic person and not being that fake person or that too pushy or all that stuff?
I would say the first thing is just the fact that we are admonished to do it. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. Because growing up in church, there is an unspoken attitude, and that is if someone offends you, if you're going to be a mature Christian, you just swallow it. Mm-hmm. Don't deal with it. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to even take the chance of it not happening. Mm-hmm. No. I think the first thing is just the fact that we are to act like this. Even if it doesn't work out, we are to act like that. We're to be approachable. We are to approach. That's the first thing.
That's good. I would add on to after that first thing is to make sure we're doing that. Our heart has to be right. You told the story earlier when we started off, Donna. The goal, and in Matthew 18, like you talked about, the goal is reconciliation.
Yeah.
No, if your goal in approaching this person is to shame them or just to dump on them because it makes you feel better, so you got to check your heart first.
Yeah.
But if the goal is reconciliation, which that's why this is such a great value of ours is this authenticity. Our goal to reconcile to one another is so that we're all reconciled to our Creator.
Yeah.
And so that would be, I'd say that's the heart of it. Make sure you're going in with that attitude. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always get received that way. And so just be okay. And that's why you have to do your own heart work first.
Yeah.
Throw a little reconciliation party or something. No, so I was thinking about this before.
Yeah.
I was thinking of in terms of my kids. And I correct my kids all the time, and they don't really take that much offense to. I'm like, oh, put that away. Like for my kids, it's like, get your wrappers out of my back seat, put your bike away. It's like 10 times a day.
Sure.
And I think sometimes in a church, we let it escalate to a point where it's a pile of 10 problems.
Yeah.
And then we bring up 2 of them, and we don't say all the other ones. Yeah. And then the other person's like, okay, it feels like there might be more here, and it's so deep, and then it's like we waited way too long. So what would happen if we just had a culture that, and Matt, you're a coach, so a coach corrects kids all the time. No offense there, right? It's like, no, stretch the field if it's soccer. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm not going to walk home, be offended. I'm not going to hold a grudge. I'm not going to think this is terrible. And so I think in a church, I think we let it get too heavy and too many before we're gutsy enough to get out there. And we just got to have real conversations here and there.
C.S. Lewis said, he's famous for this, the opposite of love is not hatred, but indifference. Now, how does that apply? It would be easier to ignore an offender.
For sure.
And to swallow it and to shove it and just to walk away. Man, it's not worth my time, man, and that knucklehead. But if I really loved that person, if I really, truly loved that person, I'm going to run the risk and go to them. Yeah, I'm going to check my own spirit to make sure that my motives are right, no question. But if I really cared about that person, I'm going to go to them. This actually happened to me, I'm going to say about 2 years ago. A friend of mine, he was one of my parishioners at church where I pastored, and he approached me. He says, Dad had come to visit the church, and the dad was impressed with me, and so the guy comes to me, not the dad, but the guy, and the guy said, he's around my age, so his dad was older, and he says this to me, my dad normally doesn't like black people, but he thinks you're amazing. And that's virtually a quote.
That is loaded.
I'm serious. I'm shaking people's hands. I'm shaking people's hands at the door. They're walking out, and he comes to me, and he honestly thought he was complimenting me. My dad doesn't normally like black people, man, but he thinks you're amazing. And I was so caught off guard, I was in shock. And you didn't just say that, did you? Yeah. And so, literally, I remember going home and I'm bothered by it, and one thing leads to another, and I don't call the guy for several weeks, and I finally call this dude and I say to him, I owe you an apology and I need to come over and talk to you. And again, went over to his house and I said, I owe you an apology. He said, about what? What you said to me was so offensive. I should have told you that. And I didn't. And that's what I'm apologizing about. And he said, well, and I told him, what's your day? And I said, man, that is not a compliment. Number one, I literally said this 13.5% of the American population is African American. That's around between 33 and 35 million people. You're telling me your dad doesn't like up to 35 million people, but he thinks I'm cool?
Wow.
I literally said that.
That's the answer.
And I said, man, that was not a compliment. And I need to tell you that, and that's why I'm apologizing, because I didn't tell you before. And also, I need to tell you that because, man, if you said that to somebody else, I don't know what they would do to you. Mm-hmm. And he took it in, and he said, I appreciate this. And we talked about it. And it was good. It was it ended good and healthy. And he was wiser, and he appreciated me taking the time to come over and what have you. And I felt better about our relationship because I could say that to him. I'm not a nice colored boy, and I shine in the midst of decrepit black people. Come on, man. Yeah. And we talked like that, and he understood it. Now, that's authentic Christianity. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but that is an example of how it worked in my life.
Yeah, that's great, Don. I love how in your illustration, and even Troy mentioned the coaching illustration or the parenting, and that's I think that's what we strive for at New Life. The authenticity comes because of relationships. Mm-hmm. So you stand up and yell from a street corner that, hey, I don't like the way you act. Mm-hmm. It may be accurate, but you have no relationship with them. Yeah. And so that's where the authenticity comes in here.
That's good.
That's why we do so many of the things we do. As a coach, when you speak into these kids' lives, it's because they're like, man, Coach Matt's pretty cool. I'm going to listen to him. Yeah. I think they think you're cool, by the way. Did you know that? Yeah.
Even if you're hard on them. Even if you're hard on them. Yeah.
And parenting has to happen the same way. And so, again, through that authenticity, we want relationships to be the place where that happens because reconciliation happens and God desires relationship with us.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's a two-way street too, right? You got to be ready to receive the information too. Like you have to be ready to give it, but you also have to be ready to receive that criticism and be willing to accept that. So I think that's cool. So we talked a little bit earlier, but is there any biblical stories that really hit the mark on authenticity and grace that you guys can think of? Kind of just sending home this point of why New Life likes these values and a biblical story to tie that in. Is there anything you guys have that comes to mind?
I mean, my favorite is Peter. And there's other ones we could bring up, but man, I love how Jesus deals with Peter. I mean, he's like, get behind me, Satan. That's just part of the daily conversation. He's like, he puts up with him, but he also just shoots it straight with him. Yeah. And Peter is just on his journey. And I love that. I love that give and take in relationships. Yeah. And being able to just be like, nope, this is the way it is. And, my wife, Leanne, is one of the best at this, is just being super authentic and tell it like it is. I remember when we first planted the church, somebody came up to her and was like, these counters need washing. And she looks at her and she do you have hands? She's like, go ahead. Get to washing. I'm not doing it. Yeah. Go ahead, jump in. You got a problem with it? Do it. And I just it takes care of the whole issue. It's just boom, just get right to the point and let's just have this conversation. Let's be real. And we're in a church setting. There's people that come in with super deep stuff. every week here. I mean, I think it's a church, but it's also a downtown church here. And it's like, there is some raw stuff that comes out. So, how do we do it? How do we accept that? And, I feel sometimes I'm like watching my chin drop and just like kind of keeping it up. Yeah. And being like, I'm not going to act surprised. Like, and we're going to be open. We're going to be accepting. We're going to be safe. Yeah. We're going to provide an environment for growth. I mean, those are some big things to do. Peter was that way, right? Because he struggled, and Jesus just lovingly allowed him to grow at his pace, even to the point of where he denied Christ after 3 years, and he let him do it. Yeah, he didn't be like, Peter, and he had to learn it the hard way, and he did. So,
and that guy became the spokesperson for the New Testament church. Yeah. The birth of the church, the day of Pentecost. Who was the spokesperson? Peter. Yeah. I mean, we think, hey, this guy's going to be a pastor. We want to make sure he's well qualified, and there's been no sin for the past 15 years. He's got credentials to prove all this. Peter would not qualify.
He's 50 days out from his failure. He's got 50 days of sobriety from sticking his foot in his mouth. Exactly. And he's preaching.
Okay. He's preaching. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Hey, another example is the book of Philemon, Onesimus, who was a runaway slave. Yeah. And you got to understand that day, and I'll just talk quickly, slavery was so common that there's evidence that medical doctors had been slaves, literally. Now, one of the reasons for that you have what's called indentured servitude. One of the ways in which you paid off your debt was to go into slavery. One of the ways you paid off your debt, send your kids into slavery. I'll tell my kids that. And and so you could be a medical doctor and be a slave, literally. Slavery, it wasn't race-based. It was based on a totally different system. Onesimus was a runaway slave. He comes to Paul, finds Paul somehow, some way, and Paul's in prison. And Paul leads him to Christ. Leads the guy to Christ and then disciples him. If you can imagine being discipled by the Apostle Paul. And so then Paul talks to this guy. Talk about authentic Christianity. Onesimus is illegal. Talk about an illegal alien. He's illegal. Yeah. And Paul tells the dude, hey, man, you got to go back. Go back where? You got to be out of your mind. Go back to Philemon? Yeah. Why? Because legally, you are a runaway slave. Now, we're going to make this right. And so there's all kinds of arguments about this, but Paul basically neutralizes the issue of slavery because he writes this letter to Philemon, and he tells Philemon, hey, I got your boy, and he's now my boy. I led him to Christ. I've been discipling him, and this guy's a strong believer, and he's a reflection of me now, Philemon, and check this out. He's coming home. And here are the rules. You treat him like you would treat me. You treat him like a brother that you would treat me. Don't you let me hear that you're abusing this dude and violating him. No, you treat him the way you would treat me. And by the way, if my memory serves me correct, Philemon, didn't I lead you to Christ? Yeah. Chump, you owe me. You owe me. And by the way, I understand he possibly stole from you when he left. I got that covered. I'll reimburse you. And by the way, I'm in prison, as you know. I need for you to pray that I'll get out of prison, and I want you to prepare a place for me to stay because I'm going to come to visit you when I get out. So you pray, I get out of prison, I'm going to come to visit you and to check out and make sure everything's okay between you and my boy. That's authentic Christianity. People argue for years, hey, why didn't Paul preach against slavery? Because he neutralized it. He neutralized it.
Wow.
And that's the whole book of Philemon right there. So tune into Don's version of the Bible. That was awesome. And that's reconciliation, authenticity to reconciliation through relationships. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think those are really good. Onesimus and Philemon is one of my favorite stories, but a really cool biblical and then even personal stories of authenticity and grace. And so if we were to hit this on the head and say, all right, guys, this is new life. This is why authenticity and grace are important. What would we say? Just to nail this thing, to finalize. What was one thing, a couple of sentences you would say? It's a tough one, but I think it's good to just finish it out.
Personally, I would say we are a house of people who acknowledge their sin and we're on a journey together. And if God will give us grace as we support and encourage, forgive, and admonish one another, we'll get there. But we are not a house full of angels. We're a house full of people who acknowledge their sin. Yeah.
And that's really good. And I think to just kind of come alongside that is, over a period of time, religion has created something called the clergy and the laity.
Yeah.
And this big difference where it's like, if I'm important in the church, then I'm up here,
Yeah.
and everybody else is down here. And I don't see that in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should be a part of church.
Right.
And
Good.
we have church leadership, but we don't have clergy and laity in a condescending way.
Right.
And so we come here every week as, leadership team people, and it's like, no, I don't have any special connection to God.
Yeah.
We each have the same connection to God.
Yeah.
I'm here to be a guide, but I'm not perfect or holier, than anybody here. And I think that we have to model that behavior.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I remember one of the first times we came and Mike Trevino got up to do like the closing or something, and he got up and he says, I was in a fight with my wife on the way here, and I didn't want to be here. I'm like, I like this guy. That's how many of us had similar things that have happened, and so that was just from the beginning. Just a great model of authenticity, representing what you were saying. Doesn't matter if it's leadership or attenders or first-time guests. And we're just broken. We're looking for relationships. We want people to be real and authentic with us, and we want to be reconciled because God's designed all of us.
Exactly.
And if Leslie's watching, it was Mike's fault. We know it.
Sorry about that, Mike.
I love that. Well, thanks, guys, for chatting a little bit about authenticity and grace. This has been a good conversation. And we'll see you guys next time. Does that work?
I like it.
All right.
That's a good
Just
ending.
call it a wrap.
Boom.